Former Chrisley Knows best star Savannah Chrisley has revealed the shocking name federal prosecutors called her parents. They were sentenced to a combined 19 years behind bars, but were released in May 2025. So, what were Todd and Julie Chrisley referred to as? Keep reading for more details. This has been a long 2.5 years dealing with Todd and Julie Chrisley heading off to jail. It started long before that with their trial, and the family hid a lot of their sadness and fear. They kept going with Chrisley Knows Best, which showed a lighthearted side and invited a lot of laughter. Sadly, when they were sentenced, Savannah Chrisley took over for her parents. She became the guardian of her younger siblings, Grayson and Chloe, while fighting for Todd and Julie's freedom. In May 2025, they were pardoned by President Trump, but they maintained that their trial was never fair. Now, Savannah, who has amassed a new fan base through her podcast, Unlocked, is opening up about what federal prosecutors called her parents. They had a shocking name, and it was the Trumps of the South. Although they may have felt this was an offensive name, Savannah and her family embraced President Trump and what he stands for. Therefore, they turned it into a positive as it did not hit as the prosecution had hoped. Yes, there were similarities between the Trumps and Chrisleys. Both are no strangers to reality television as President Trump helmed The Apprentice. Todd and Julie Chrisley showcased their lives on Chrisley Knows Best. Then, Chase and Savannah Chrisley headed over to Growing Up Chrisley for a new spin on the reality series. Both families have been on trial and feel they have been treated unfairly, so yes, the moniker makes sense. At the end of the day, both families are attempting to do what they love and keep on going. Chrisley will join her family in their new reality series, Back to Reality, which will air on Lifetime. It will start before Todd and Julie Chrisley are released from prison, and the harsh reality of what they went through. Furthermore, it will showcase the struggles their kids faced without their parents and how hard they fought. Finally, it will explore their release and the couple reuniting after 2.5 years away from each other. Fans of the family are more than thrilled for this to premiere. This should be an adventure, and a lot of praise will go to the current administration for helping free Todd and Julie. What do you think of the nickname prosecutors gave to Todd and Julie? Moreover, do you think Savannah Chrisley cares as long as her parents are free? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Standing at the edge of the courtroom aisle, Savannah Chrisley scans the faces before her, reporters eager for her words, cameras clicking, and journalists perched on the edge of their notepads. Her voice, steady and resolute, begins to fill the hushed room. How do you define justice? Is it blind, fair, balanced? Or is it something brittle, cracked, partial, waiting to shatter at the wrong drop of truth? 4 years, she begins. My parents, Todd and Julie Chrisley, were pillars of Southern charm, humor, and heart. They built a life, a family documented on Chrisley Knows Best, a home rooted in real estate and love. They were successful, they were visible, and they became targets. I want to tell you something unfiltered, something the courtroom walls already know but the world needs to hear. In that federal courtroom, under the gaze of an Obama-appointed judge, the prosecutor looked at my family, at their laughs, their Southern drawl, our mid-Atlantic Southern hospitality, and he said something I will never forget: you are the Trumps of the South. He didn't say it as a compliment. He delivered it like he was exposing a badge of dishonesty. But let me tell you, boy, do I wear that title as a badge of honor. She pauses, her eyes steady, drawing breath as if the weight of those words finally reached the world beyond her chest. That phrase, Trumps of the South, it wasn't just words. It was a spotlight, a label, a narrative device they pinned on my parents. They meant it so it would shrink under the glare. But what they didn't count on was the strength that label gave us. You see, what began as an insult for them became an emblem of resilience for our family. Because we're not just a reality TV family, we're real people under fire. And when the system, this federal system, pulled us before them, they didn't just see Todd and Julie Chrisley. They saw fame. They saw politics. They saw conservative values. and they tried to strip us of everything. But too often, the real story is buried underneath the headline screaming fraud or tax evasion. What they didn't report, the 9-year investigation. The prosecutor's team in Fulton County originally dismissed the case, said it was weak, didn't have enough evidence. Yet suddenly, years later, it resurfaces, stronger, louder, deadlier. Or they chose to. They dug deep. And in that moment, my family became a symbol of whatever they thought America was forgetting. So when the prosecutor called us the Trumps of the South, he meant it as a dig, a way to dismiss us as superficial, big and showy, an easy mark. But I want you to know, there's beauty in that oversimplification. There's power in owning it. That phrase inspired me. In the darkest hours, that cold January day when my parents reported to prison, I wasn't just the daughter of convicted criminals. I became the guardian of my siblings. Chloe and Grayson were under my watch. My heart didn't weigh regret. I weighed responsibility. I became their backbone. I called their prison. I pleaded for compassion for Mom, stuck in a facility without air conditioning in Kentucky. I appeal now, regardless of wrongdoing. Everyone deserves the basics. Dignity, human decency. I told President Trump, because I had to see the humanity behind the headlines. I explained how harsh the sentences were, 12 years for Dad, 7 for Mom. How procedural errors and constitutional questions kept piling on. Unauthorized raids, alleged IRS misconduct, an institution refusing to treat them as human beings with rights. I recorded it. In my podcast, Unlocked, I asked you all to see beyond the narrative, to uncover what happens when the justice system is more performative than fair. And that's when, finally, clemency came. A pardon granted on May 29, 2025. And yes, allies helped. But none louder or prouder than the daughter who refused to let a label define her parents. Yet, standing here today, I'm not just celebrating freedom. I'm honoring the weight of that label. Because the Trumps of the South, we're not perfect. But we're Southern. And we're proud. We believe in faith, family, fortitude, and we believe in justice, however slow. So I want those words, even if born from disdain, to go around the world. Let others sneer, call us that. But I'll wear it with pride. Because it means we stood tall in a system that wanted to see us fall. And here's my final word. Justice isn't blind when fame and politics and identity intersect. In my family's fight, tucked between fraud charges and tax filings, the truth was personal. And the verdict was more than a sentence. It was a story they wanted us to accept. I didn't expect the first blow to land in a courtroom. I thought it would come through the tabloids, through Instagram captions, or whispered in grocery store lines. But no. The real assault came cold, flat, clinical from the prosecutor's lips in a bright, sterile courtroom in Atlanta. Georgia Dot sat in the gallery, knees pressed together, hands fisted in my lap, listening to implications about fraud investigations, about financial wrongdoing, about conspiracy and deceit. It wasn't that those words didn't hurt. They stung sharp. But public, expected, rehearsed. What took my breath away was the phrase the prosecutor used, rolling it off like a verdict before the verdict. You are the Trumps of the South. Not. You've defrauded. Not. You lied. But you are the Trumps of the South, as though that name alone encapsulated a crime. When he said those words, time shuddered. My ears rang. My heart pressed heavy in my chest, as if each beat were a defiance echoing against justice's framework. He didn't call them fraudsters or tax cheats. He called them something else, something bigger, broader, loaded with cultural ammunition, the Trumps of the South. I realized those were not words he uttered that day in judgment. They were arrows aimed at distraction. He was summoning spectacle, tossing us into a carnival mirror of politics and performance. It wasn't law, it was theater. The name Trump didn't stick to them because of business acumen or TV fame. It was a catch-all for showy, provocative, bold, dangerous, and of the South. That conjured cliches, sweet tea, magnolia with a side of old money, pride, tradition. It was supposed to be dismissive, reductive, dismissing them as caricatures of wealth, arrogance, scandal. But they're not caricatures. Not then. Not in the flush of that verdict. When he uttered it, what he really meant was, you embody everything our system fears. You're visible, unapologetic, diagnosable at a glance. And because we were visible, we were vulnerable. I watched my mother's hands grip each other until her knuckles turned white. I saw Dad's jaw tighten, his southern pride bracing against the humiliation of being distilled to a nickname. That phrase hung over them, over me, heavy as a crown of thorns. We might have been deceivable, but certainly not invisibly so. But in the courtroom, that moniker was meant to reduce them, not humanize them.